I am from the island of Negros in the Philippines, and I grew up in a poor village in the mountains. As a child, I knew nothing of the world outside the village, but I sensed there was something more. As a teenager, I longed to run away from the village and make something of my life. If I stayed here, I knew that I would end up like everyone else. They struggled to make even a single centavo to buy food. My mother angrily attacked me one day after I told the family my plans of leaving the village. She beat me and called me a stupid girl. As she hit me, I knew I had to escape this backwoods place. That night, when my family was asleep, I fled from my home, never to return. I managed to save some money and I made my way to Manila. Life in Manila was tough, and I struggled harder than what I did when I was in the village. But after a while, I found work as a live-in domestic helper. I did this for a few years, and I looked after a wonderful little boy while his parents were away working. During this time, I met my husband-to-be, Ermin, and we fell deeply in love. And after I finished working as a live-in maid, we married and had 2 children. We left Manila and we went to Iloilo to start our new life. It was challenging trying to survive on his police salary. One of my dear friends told me about an opportunity to go and work abroad as a domestic helper in Canada. The money was good, and we could buy our own home and have a good life, if I went to Canada. Ermin was reluctant to let me go. After I explained all the benefits to our family, he eventually let me go. I arrived in Canada and was met at the airport by a private driver. I'd never been in a limousine before, and I felt like a princess. After about an hour, we arrived at my new home. The Victorian-style manor was like nothing I'd ever seen. Marble pillars surround the outside of the house. Their pure white columns held up the roof with unbridled strength. Rose bushes and other delicate flowers surrounded the red path leading to the polished stairs. The driver showed me into the house, and when we entered, the smell of wine wafted into my sensitive nose. "Ah, you must be Maria, and it is a pleasure to meet you. My name is Emmanuel. I am Mr. Clark's butler. I assist in taking care of the master, but now you are here, that will be your duty. Let me take you upstairs to meet the master." I looked up at Emmanuel, an old gentleman in his late 40s. His dark, black hair had a tinge of silver starting to come in. His face was prominent with an air of humility, and his lip was covered with a dark brown moustache. Still, his brown eyes were very sharp, and they looked like they saw everything that went on inside that house. Following Emmanuel up the stairs, he walked through the maze of twisting hallways until he came to Mr. Clark's room. He pushed the door open. I was surprised at the size of the room, and I knew that my entire house could fit into this place at least 3 times. In the centre of the room was a large king-size bed with 4 posts. In the bed was an older man. His grey hair rested lightly on his forehead, and deep wrinkles covered his face. The man put down the paper he was reading and stared in my direction. Emmanuel took a few moments to introduce me to Mr. Clark. "Hello, Mr. Clark. My name is Maria. It is a pleasure to meet you, and I look forward to working for you." The master was still looking at me seriously, and his eyes were penetrating my soul. After a few moments, his eyes softened. He motioned for me to come closer. As I approached the bed, he started smiling. It was a very charming smile, almost like my grandfather's, each time that my grandfather came to see me. "Maria, it is lovely to meet you. I am Mr. Clark, and I've been waiting for you to arrive. I'm not well these days, so I needed you to take care of me during the day, but you'll not be needed of a night time. I only have one rule, Maria, that you do not come into this room after I dismiss you for the day. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir. I understand." He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a silver key, and he explained that after my day's work, I was to lock his bedroom door and not to come back until I was summoned in the morning. Working for Mr. Clark was lovely, and I enjoyed every moment of it. He was a very gentle man and treated me with the utmost respect. I would cook, clean, and administer his medication. As requested, I locked his room every night at precisely 6 p.m. when the sun went down, and I did not open it again until 6 a.m. I did this for a few months, but curiosity was getting the better of me. What was he doing all night locked in his room? Was he alright? What if he had a heart attack whilst locked in his room? I would get blamed by the police for it if there was any investigation. One night, my curiosity finally got the better of me, so I decided to go and find out what was happening for myself. Sneaking out of bed, I pulled off my sheets and started creeping towards Mr. Clark's room. The cold wooden floor is smooth under my bare feet, and they did not make a sound as I sneaked through the house. Reaching his door, I pulled out the silver key from my robe pocket, sliding it into the keyhole, trying not to make any noise at all. Twisting the key in a slow, delicate motion, the tumblers fall into place. There is a loud click that echoes throughout the house. Pausing momentarily, I listen to ensure no one is approaching. Swallowing hard, I turn the doorknob, and the door opens slowly. Looking into the room, I hear no noise coming from inside, no breathing or snoring. Digging deep to find strength to enter the room, I hold my breath and I sneak ever so quietly into his room. Approaching the bed, I hope Mr. Clark is alright, since it is so quiet. Looking at his bed, I realise it is empty. Where is Mr. Clark? Panic starts rising in the pit of my stomach, making its descent into my heart. It feels like my heart is ready to burst out of my chest. It is thumping hard against my ribcage, causing severe pain to emanate throughout my chest. Looking desperately around in the dark room, I cannot see Mr. Clark anywhere. Quickly, I run towards the light switch. I needed to find him. I need to find him now. As my hand reached for it, there was a sharp pain in my wrist and I could not move it any further. Pointed fingers were digging into my flesh. I wanted to scream. Before I realized what was happening, I was flying towards the bed, and my feet left the ground with such violence, I didn't even have time to understand what was happening. My body hit the bed. I could not move. Mr. Clark was on top of me, pinning me to his bed. His face. What was wrong with his face? His mouth started to open, but it was spreading further than what should have ever been possible. I could hear his flesh tearing, and it was the sound of a pig being skinned. I wanted to scream, but I was scared, and no sound would come out of my mouth. His hand reached up and grasped my chin, pulling my mouth open. His fingers dug into my cheeks, forcing my teeth apart. His mouth grew larger and larger. His tongue slithered out of his mouth. It was long and pointed. There was a large black stone at the end of his tongue, and it slithered in front of my face. I felt it press against my lips. His saliva stunk of rotting flesh. His tongue flowed into my open lips, filling my mouth. Breathing was hard as he pushed the black stone deep into my throat. It had been 6 months since Maria left our tiny home to go to Canada to work as an overseas Filipino worker. At first, we communicated weekly, and Maria would send her wages home for our children. But after a few months, she stopped calling. I was starting to get worried. Was she alright? Was her employer treating her well? But it was getting time for her to come home, and I was looking forward to our family being together again. Maria finally arrived home, and I met her at the ferry station. She looked different than before. She was pale. She just didn't look healthy. She had black circles under her eyes. After a few days of Maria being home, she was quiet and despondent, and she never spoke. unlike what she was before. I was growing concerned, but I thought maybe, just maybe, she was tired from her trip and decided to let her rest for a while. I returned home from work and there was a smell of adobo in the air. This was the first time Maria had cooked since she had arrived home. Ah, Mahal, that smells delicious. What meat did you use? I asked as I entered the house. There was no answer. Maria was at the table, eating the food. Meat and sauce was smeared all over her face as she shoved the food into her mouth like she hadn't eaten in months. I sat across from her and I asked where the children were and why they were not here eating as well. She looked up momentarily and said, "They are here, darling. Can you not see them?" Feeling puzzled, I looked at her and asked her again, "Where are the children?" I asked with much more urgency in my voice. "They are here. Are you blind?" She growled at me. Confused, I stood up and said I'd have something else, walking to the refrigerator to get some leftover food. Something didn't seem right about that adobo Maria was eating. Reaching for the cold steel door handle of the refrigerator, I pulled it open. There was a burst of cold air. It was very refreshing against the hot, humid summer day. As I looked in the refrigerator, my heart stopped. I could not believe what I was looking at. The horror in my soul exploded out of me in a shrill scream that echoed throughout the house. Inside, I could see what was left of my children, and their lifeless eyes were staring at me. Slamming the door shut, I turned to look at Maria. She was still eating like an animal. I don't know what to say. I felt hatred. How could she do this to our children? I do not remember picking up the bolo, but I remember swinging at Maria's head. The metal bit into her mouth. Maria screamed as it sliced her mouth open. Dropping her food, she stood up with the bolo still stuck in her mouth. Grabbing it, she started to pull it back out. It slid out with a sickening sound. She dropped the bolo on the ground, turned around, and ran out of the house. Falling to my knees, screaming and wailing like a small child, my life was over. What had happened to my wife? My children? Tears streamed down my face. I was broken, and I would never heal. It is said that Maria can still be found in the forests around Iloilo, searching for children to eat. Those who have seen the Aswang report that she has 2 large scars running from her mouth to her ears from Irwin's bolo. If you ever see a woman with scars on her face, run. Hey, Mike here. I hope you enjoyed today's lullaby about Maria Labo, the Aswang of Iloilo. If you like this urban legend series, please comment down below. Also, the analytics say that 85% of you are not subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, please hit that subscribe button. And remember, like, share, and comment. And lastly, remember, keep watching for what's in the dark.